Hello and welcome to this edition of Healthy Living. I'm your host, Frank Poulin. Today we're here with Amal Patel, District Epidemiologist for the Virginia Department of Health. Mr. Patel, thank you very much for joining us.
No problem.
Now, can you kind of explain your title and what your role with the Department of Health is?
Sure. Epidemiology is basically the study of the distribution of disease in a population. So my specific job here for the health department is if there's any large increases of a certain type of illness that would signify an outbreak, it's up to me to investigate that and find out the cause and offer solutions and offer public health interventions to limit the spread of that disease in the population. And again, I serve the city of Suffolk as one part of the district, so I'm responsible for the city of Suffolk in terms of disease burden and all that.
And speaking of disease, one of the things this year that's been in the news lately is influenza and the flu, and certain, especially with the vaccination this year, hasn't been as effective?
Correct.
Okay. And how big is the outbreak? What are we looking at? Is there?
Influenza, it's an outbreak that occurs every year. You know, we tend to call it, influenza season.
Okay.
For Virginia specifically, our influenza peak is usually the last 2 weeks of January into February.
Okay.
But this year has been different, and this trend is nationwide, that influenza, the peak influenza burden of disease this year was actually around Christmas time.
Really?
And since then, it has slowly gone down, but we're still in a widespread situation, which is one of the categories the CDC describes for influenza throughout the country. And widespread means it's everywhere in the United States. There's not any
no
part of the
demographic
nation
that's getting it, or
well, I mean,
kids versus adults.
Our surveillance system, we look more in locations as opposed to specific age groups, and it's widespread throughout the U.S. There's not one part of the country that can say, we don't have a high influenza disease burden.
Got it. And now, is it bigger than usual because of the fact that the vaccination might not be as successful?
One thing I want to make a point about the influenza vaccine, the formulation is set typically 9 months before the flu season.
Okay.
So as we're going through this flu season, we tend to look at what strains are circulating. And then the CDC takes all that information and they tell the vaccine manufacturers, these are the strains we're seeing the most of. These are the strains we feel like are going to be the predominant strains the following season, because there is a lag time in development of the vaccine.
Manufacturing.
So, manufacturing of the vaccine. This year, we start to see H3N2. That was a predominant strain circulating. It wasn't in the vaccine, or the H3N2 equivalent in the vaccine was not a good match for the strain circulating. So that's why they say the CDC has reported, I think, that this year's vaccine was 23% effective, which is very low.
Yeah.
But then again, any protection is better than no protection.
Very
so
true. Yeah.
we
23
always
versus 0.
we always tell people to get the influenza vaccine. Of course, no vaccine is 100% effective, but with the influenza vaccine, if you do get the flu, it tends to be less severe, and symptoms usually last 1 day shorter than a typical influenza illness would.
Okay.
So that's why we always say, go ahead and get the vaccine. And it's still not too late to get the vaccine.
Okay.
Because again, we're still in a widespread situation. After you get the vaccine, it takes about 2 weeks for your body to have a built-up immune response to the influenza virus. So it's still a good idea to go ahead.
It's still worthwhile to definitely get the vaccination.
Correct.
Now, what are certain things to look for? Because I know a lot of doctors' offices say we have to test you for the flu. What can distinguish, I guess, the common cold versus the flu when you should see a doctor?
Well, predominant symptoms are fever, cough, sore throat. It can even include body aches, headache. In very rare cases, it's also diarrhea and vomiting. But it's usually the fever that's the tipping point, along with the sore throat and cough.
Okay.
And typically people who do have the flu realize they do have the flu because they feel really miserable, to the point where it's hard for them to get up and do common activities.
Is there anything you can do when you're starting to feel under the weather that could either shorten the duration or limit its impact?
if you do feel like, you might be coming down with something that, feels like the flu or has the symptoms of the flu, it's best before you go to your doctor's office to call your doctor's office, because sometimes the doctor will, tell you if your symptoms aren't severe, just rest at home and recover, stay hydrated. But if your symptoms are severe, they'll probably ask you to come in. But they also want to know when you're coming in so you don't potentially expose other people in their office.
The waiting room
So they might, say, come in at this time, and they'll take you directly into a room for testing. And then there are antivirals that they can prescribe to help shorten the duration of illness. But then again, the antivirals are only most effective at the beginning of illness.
Okay, and now you see some people, walking around with masks or stuff like that. Are these effective responses to not get the flu? Is there any?
Well, the best way to not get the flu is A, the vaccine, and then B, I know this is a public health intervention. I tell everyone whenever they talk about almost any illness, wash your hands.
Okay.
That's one of the most important things. If you ever look at, or just count how many times you'll touch your mouth, nose, or eyes without washing your hands, and that's a perfect way for any virus that you touch off a table, doorknob, or anything get into your body and make you ill.
Okay.
So wash your hands, and again, I can't stress enough, the vaccine is the most effective way to help prevent illness.
And most people understand and know about the flu, but there's another disease that's kind of been in the news lately that people are starting to become more aware of, and that's the measles, obviously.
Correct. This recent measles outbreak has they have kind of traced it back to the amusement park in California, Disneyland. There's been about 100 cases so far.
Okay.
In Virginia, I want to stress that there have been no confirmed cases so far.
Okay. Is this something we see every year, or is this unique to this year?
This is a very unique outbreak. We're seeing more and more of it.
Okay.
It's the measles is, again, another virus. It is spread through droplets, basically meaning if someone is sick with measles, if they cough, if they sneeze, even if they talk, the virus gets in the air, and someone else in that room who breathes in that, comes in direct contact with that virus, can become sick.
Oh, wow. So it doesn't even have to be that person necessarily, if it's in the air in a room like this, so to speak.
Someone who has measles and is contagious, if they're in a room and they leave that room, that virus can survive in the air for up to 2 hours.
Oh, wow.
So we always say...
Even with the person gone, the virus is still there.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
And that's why we say it's very, very contagious. And again, one of the most effective way to prevent measles is to have the MMR vaccine, measles, mumps, rubella vaccine. Okay. Majority of children get it, the first shot 12 to 15 months, and then the second shot 4 to 6 years. So by the time they're entering kindergarten, they've already become immunized, and after the second shot, it's about 97% effective.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So I looked up the numbers for the city of Suffolk for private and public schools. Private schools had a 100% MMR vaccination rate. Okay. Our public schools had a 97.6% immunization rate. So that's very good. The higher the number, the better, because one of the ways measles is prevented through immunization is a term called herd immunity. Okay. So the higher percentage of that herd that's immunized, you have, any children or adults that cannot get the vaccine just through issues with, their immune system, pre-existing conditions like cancer. Okay. If they can't get it, they're unprotected. But because, like in our school-age population, say 97% of the population is immunized, so those 3%, it's hard, so like in this room, there's 3 of us, there's a good chance all 3 of us are immunized. If someone walks in that, is sick, we won't get sick and we won't spread it beyond this room. Okay. So herd immunity is very important. That's why we stress that, the more people that are vaccinated against measles, the better.
Okay, and what are some symptoms of measles? How do you know if you're getting it? How do you distinguish?
Measles starts with a fever, about 101 degrees up to 103, 105 degrees. Okay. A few days or, sometime after the fever, you'll start with cough, runny nose, malaise, which is basically you're not feeling well.
Okay.
I mean, you know something's wrong with you.
Yeah.
You can't put a, you don't know what it is, but your body just doesn't feel well.
So it's not like influenza where you're feeling miserable.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
well,
This is.
Well, you're still feeling uncomfortable.
Okay.
But the telltale difference between influenza and measles is about 3 to 7 days after you've had that fever onset, you'll start having a rash.
Okay.
Starts with the face, goes to the trunk, will go to the extremities, arms, legs, and then to the soles of your feet and your hands.
Oh, wow.
So that rash is the telltale sign.
Got it.
But the problem with measles is you're contagious 4 days before that rash ever starts.
Oh, wow.
And 4 days after the rash.
Okay.
So that's 8 days you're contagious, and we talked about how highly contagious it is. So, it's very important that people do get vaccinated to prevent because, like I said, that one person, if they, go into a room with a lot of people, some might not be immunized.
Yeah.
It's a very high chance that they could become ill with measles.
And what is the treatment for measles, I guess?
There is no specific treatment
There
for
isn't?
measles. It's more just, treating the symptoms, trying to make you more comfortable while your body fights off the illness.
Got it.
So, if you have a fever, they'll probably, prescribe aspirin. If you have, any infections, bacterial infections, antibiotics.
Okay.
But again, measles is a virus. There is no treatment for it once you become ill with it.
Okay, and you've mentioned that it travels through the air, so
Yes.
that's why it's so widespread. The first initial case in Disneyland, 4
Yeah.
days, the incubation period. These people get on planes.
Yeah, and the incubation period, it's up to 21 days.
Okay. Oh, wow.
The most often it's about 10 days that people will, if they become, if they've come into contact or becoming ill within 10 days, they'll start showing symptoms.
Okay.
But it can take up to 21 days after that contact.
Oh, wow.
So, it's still like, the Disneyland outbreak, it's still ongoing because,
Oh, yeah, it's not
they're
over yet.
Yeah, they're
Yeah.
still finding more and more cases. And each new case they find, they've got to expand that search to look at that person's contacts. So
Okay.
it's that, that's another reason to stress the vaccine because that's, again, after the second dose, 97% effective.
Is there any other information you'd like to mention about the virus?
No, but one thing I did want to mention, if for the MMR vaccine or the influenza vaccine, if people are interested, the Suffolk Health Department does offer walk-in immunization clinics
Okay.
Monday through Thursday, 1 to 3 p.m.
Okay, great.
So if anyone's concerned, if they know they haven't had their full schedule of measles, mumps, rubella vaccine, they can come in on a walk-in basis during those hours.
And if they have any questions, they can obviously call the health department as well.
Correct. And there's another avenue of information on the web. It's the Virginia Department of Health website, and we'll share that
Yeah, absolutely.
link.
Yeah. Well, great. Well, thank you so much for joining us today.
No problem.
And thank you very much for joining us today. Stay healthy, stay safe. We'll see you next time.